Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start in just a minute. Just going to take some time and let folks gather here in the Zoom meeting. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Liana Salama. I am the Vice President of Marketing for the International Housewares Association. And today's webinar is on best practices for returning to work safely and effectively following COVID-19. I don't know about all of you, but IHA is actually in the process right now. It's our first week back in the office. We're on a staggered schedule, so taking a lot of precautions. So our speaker today is going to talk a little bit about some of those types of precautions and ways that you can make sure that you're protecting your employees and yourself as you reopen your offices and stores. Our speaker today is Edwin Foulke Jr. He is a partner in the Atlanta office of Fisher & Phillips, LLP. Ed also serves as president of Fisher Phillips Safety Solutions. And prior to joining Fisher & Phillips, Ed was the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupational Safety and Health. He was named by President George W. Bush to head up OSHA, and Ed served in that capacity from April 2006 to November 2008. During his tenure at OSHA, workplace injury, illness, and fatality rates dropped to their lowest levels in recorded history. For more than 30 years, Ed has worked in the labor and employment area, focusing on occupational safety and health issues. He also served on the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission in Washington, D.C., chairing the commission from March 1990 to February 1994. Ed has been named one of the 50 most influential EHS leaders by EHS Today magazine for several years, and named one of the 50 most influential EHS leaders in the United States by Occupational Hazards magazine. He is recognized as one of the nation's leading authorities on occupational safety and health issues. Before I turn it over to Edwin, just a couple of housekeeping notes. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available on our housewares.org site within the next 48 hours. And in terms of Q&A, we will do a Q&A session following the presentation. If you mouse over your Zoom application, you see a little box that says Q&A. You can click on there and submit questions at any point during the presentation. I will be collecting them on the back end. And then once Edwin has finished his presentation, I will rejoin and facilitate the Q&A based on what everybody sent. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ed. Ed, thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Anna, and welcome everybody, and or good morning or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. I did want to just say, I want to start off, always like to start off with saying thank you for your commitment, your company's commitment to safety and health. It really is important, and the safety profession probably doesn't get as much credit as it should get about the things that they've been doing that allows people to go home safe and sound each and every night to their families and loved ones, because if you prevent someone from getting injured or killed, you wouldn't know that ever occurred. So, so that's why I just say thank you for that. And this is going to be a very important subject. We're talking about returning to work safely, because there's a lot of other potential legal implications that are going to be kind of associated with this. Because if you don't do it right, more than likely, if you're not having the things in place that you really need to, or what your employees are expecting to be in place, then what is going to happen is either they're going to call their OSHA and file a complaint, or maybe even do and as we're bringing people back too, we might be getting some whistleblower complaints on that too. And if we're not doing the things right, maybe the employees will be then filing lawsuits. And we're seeing a bunch of lawsuits around the country involving failure of employers to deal with safety issues or more health issues, I guess, to a certain degree, from the COVID-19. And so you need to be aware of that. And that's why return to work is going to be very important. How we do that is going to be very important. So, and of course, one of the things that you're going to have to do is make sure that you're aware of what your particular state, and if your company has multiple locations in multiple states, that's going to make it even harder for you. It's because what we're having, and we've been monitoring our firm, Phillips has been doing a lot of materials, a lot of stuff. Actually, we have one of the, I think one of the best our web page on our home website on COVID-19 is considered one of the best. We have other law firms taking stuff that we're doing and trying on off of it as their own. So it's been kind of interesting in that respect. And we got notified last week that from Google that we had on our COVID-19 website, we'd had, I think it was 150 million hits. So it's been very interesting, and that just kind of shows you why this is important. So, but I think you get all these phases that are going on right now, and different states have different phases, and that's what I'm going to say. One of the most important things is you're going to make sure that when you're starting out, when you're getting ready to bring people back, there's several things you're going to do, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things you really need to be looking at is what are the laws that are going on? What are the statutes? What are the executive orders that have been issued by the governors? What are the local county orders? I mean, that's one thing. If you're down in Florida, or if you're out in California, there are all kinds of county orders and regulations you're going to have to follow about what you're supposed to be doing with respect to COVID-19. But in phase one, we're trying to recommend that employees, follow kind of 5 steps when they're starting to get the idea about it. Going to continue to request people to work from home. I'm actually calling from my house, and it's quiet today because my 7-year-old daughter is at the Peach Pit summer camp. So she's doing gymnastics today, or she would be coming in here wanting to assist in this webinar. But we're going to continue to encourage people to do remote work or telework where possible. And this is something that down the road you're going to have companies are going to have to start making some decisions about. Who are we going to maybe allow just to be continually staying at home? I think Twitter has already said that they're going to allow people to work from home, and so I think that's part of the new norm or the new normal, whatever you want to call it, that you're going to see in the business world today. And of course, we really want to look to see if we're going to return to work, can we do it in phases? In other words, Leanna had mentioned that they've come back. And they're working kind of in phases too. And so that's kind of where I think most businesses are going to be. There's a large percentage of the companies, you got to remember this stuff. While we talk about very large numbers, 20% unemployment, that means that 80% of the employees continue to work all during this time period. So, but then, and their challenges have been very great, and the challenges are going to be continually great as we continue forward. So, but if you haven't had your operation, if you've been sheltering at home or working from home, and for the last, I don't know how long you've been out. I've been out 72 days. So the last time I was at work was 72 days ago in the office. So, but I think, and we're talking that as a law firm, we're going to be coming back in phases too. We're only going to allow X number of lawyers to come in at any particular day, X number of staff people. So there. You're going to close the common areas. Clearly, that's going to be happening, and that's going to be for a while until I suspect you can anticipate that all common areas like break rooms or whatever are going to be kept closed. I don't think people will be eating lunches at their desk, and so you won't be doing that. I think that will be lasting until we get a vaccine. I just don't see that changing because it's just it's not. It's gonna. And of course, non-essential business travel. That I think we'll be continuing to discourage that, or at least clearly minimize it. I mean, of course, if you have stuff that you got to do, business travel you got to do. I'm right now. Actually have two OSHA fatality investigations going on, and Monday I had to go down to Alabama where the fatality occurred, and that was the first time I had done any traveling for the 70 days, or actually a little bit longer than that. So, and then it's about adhering to the CDC guidelines regarding isolation following travel. And if you want to have a golden rule on anything, and I can't remember if I put that as a separate slide, but if you want to, one of the things, if you want to protect yourself, particularly from potentially OSHA citations or lawsuits, you need to be following the CDC guidelines. You need to also be familiar with the EEOC guidelines about things you can do and things you can ask, and the OSHA guidelines. Those are the other things. And one thing you're going to see too, and I'll mention this right now, is that you're going to see more. There's the possibility that we may be seeing more activity by OSHA, and I'll talk a little about that soon in one of these other slides. But because you're going to be clearly, there's been a push. A lawsuit was filed against OSHA by the AFL-CIO to have them do a temporary emergency standard for contagious diseases, and so and I don't know what the judge is going to rule on, how they're going to rule on that, but that will be coming out. And it may say that OSHA has to come out with this temporary emergency standard on infectious diseases within 30 days. So we'll have to watch that too. But, and then of course, we're going to have to try to accommodate special accommodations for people that are in vulnerable populations. Although there is a caveat there, you got to be a little bit concerned about that. That's not, we got to be careful because there are different concerns about age discrimination or any type of disability. And that's why I'm saying look at the EEOC guidance. EEOC has kind of loosened the rules with respect to accommodations and stuff like that under ADA. So you need just to be a little bit aware about that. So during phase 2, we're still going to do some work. We're going to continue still to close common areas, but we're clearly going to be enforcing at least moderate social distancing protocols where you can. Probably at that point in time, we're going to be doing more non-business essential travel, or non-essential business travel will be there. And then once again, we'll still be looking at the special accommodations, but once again, we'll continue to encourage, particularly the vulnerable population, people that are over 65, people that are have respiratory problems, those type of things there. So just going to be aware about that. So, and of course, phase 3 is when we're going to be coming in, where we're going to have resume full operations. And I'm still not convinced that the new normal will look like the old normal. Probably not, if I had to say so. But I know one area there's a big concern for a lot of people is that you're going to see a lot of companies that are going to say, we don't need all this office space. And so we got people who can work at home. We're going to have space for them if they come in, that they'll have a place where they can hang their hat and do work. But we're not going to have as much office spaces as we had before. I think that's going to be, if you're going to ask me what the new normal going to look like, that's part of what you're going to have. You're going to have a lot less people having their own specific office. And instead they'll be sharing offices or tables or desks and whatever there. So, but once again, the unrestricted staffing probably is not going to come into the fall because until we get a vaccine, I really think you're going to have to wait to see that, because I think that's what's going to be doing that. So here's where we're we're looking at relief, how to restart, how to recover, re-imaging. All these things are going to be very important as part of our program. So a restart plan for action. If you do not have, I had a question, I did a program the other day, and this come out, is it required that I have a COVID-19, action plan or control plan? And my answer was to them, I said, well, no, you don't, there's no requirement right now, but I don't know how you're going to be able to do that without having a response plan and put in a response team. It's just that's not going to restart. You're going to have to think the COVID-19 control plan or action plan, whatever you want to call it, response plan, whatever. It's going to have all the things that you want people to do. It's going to be talking a lot of detail, and you're seeing a lot of it already out there. If you're out in the public, you're seeing it. You're seeing that pretty much most everybody's is wearing masks now. And to be quite honest, I think that should be pretty much any company that's not requiring masks, you're just asking for problems, additional problems. And we'll talk a little bit more when we talk a little bit about the litigation stuff there. But we're going to have a plan in place for how to restart plan, our restart action plan. And that's going to spell out all the things we're doing, how we're going to bring people back. How are we going to make, are we going to be encouraging people to stay home and telecommute from home? I think you're going to see more of that. And then, of course, as you do more of that, then you're going to have policies and procedures on monitoring and everything else to make sure that the people are doing the work that they're supposed to be doing, even though they're at home and they're telecommuting, because you can't have people just sitting at home watching television, obviously. So, and of course, the re-image processes are going to be looking at how we rebrand, how we're going to be seen about our company and how the things we're going to be doing. The protocols, and this is all going to be in our response plan, is what are the protocols, procedures, and policies that we're going to have in place? What are we going to do about social distancing? What are we going to do about wearing masks? What about gloves? What about taking temperatures? All these things are spelled out in our control plan. And so the question is, do I have to? Is there a mandatory requirement for a control plan? Well, no, there's not. But if you don't have one, you're not going to have. It's not going to happen. Your program's not going to be successful. So, and I also remember what I said there about evaluating local and state shutdown orders. And this is something you're going to have to monitor on a weekly basis. I wished it was a yearly basis, but it ain't. I mean, we've been watching, and it's been very difficult. We probably have 30 different lawyers that have been involved in these different things and have different responsibilities on different aspects of this COVID-19. We got people, because we have 33, Phillips has 33 offices around the country. So we're in a lot of the states, and we've been monitoring that. And we've been monitoring the state laws. We've been monitoring the governor's executive orders. And then, of course, the big kicker is monitoring the state, the county rules, the county COVID-19 rules. And this has been particularly, like I say, in Florida. I do a lot of stuff with the International Car Wash Associations. So this is all the car washes around the country. Well, Florida, I mean, they had their executive governor's order, and that kept changing about once every at least once a week. But we had all these county ordinances out there, and the governor did not, in his executive order, did not say, well, this supersedes all the county orders, which would have been nice. But for the car wash people, I was getting calls. I mean, we're monitoring all these different counties, and all the counties in Florida, and it's like half of them had said that car washes were essential businesses, and thus could be operating. Then the other half of the counties said no. They're not essential businesses and they can't operate. And we're having sheriffs showed up at businesses saying you got to close down and all this stuff. So and we've been filing, lawsuits and everything else. So it's just a lot. But this is unfortunately, there's no organization, and you know how the government works. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. So that's why it's going to say you're going to have to continue to look. You're going to say what county am our operations in, what state is our operation in, and what rules are applicable there, and we can go from there. So, of course, we're going to have to look about part of our restart plan, how we're going to handle finances. We had the PPP forgiveness program for the loans. You're going to have to be checking out on that. Also, before you start up, you're going to have to make sure, what are your vendors and suppliers doing? Can they start supplying you? When can they start supplying? You can't open up if you don't have supply. I have a good one of my clients was up in New York. They've been supplying all the all the restaurants in New York City. They're known. I mean, they provide all this high-end stuff, and they had probably a fleet of over 100 trucks, and they'd be going from restaurant to restaurant, getting these foods, these very high-end type of food stuff with that. And all of a sudden there was no restaurants there, and so and now they've moved on. Well, they've not moved on, but they evolved, and they started delivering food to businesses and homes, and now they got like $500,000 a day business. And they're talking about, well, how are we going to get back when when the restaurants start all open again? Well, how are we going to do all this and do what this? Because they're not going to give that up now too. So now they're talking about doing a new warehouse. So you're going to have to check with all your people, all your vendors and suppliers, and find out where are they in their restart operation? How are they going to be able to? Are they able to get the supplies that you need? And you have that. So. And of course, you're going to have to figure out what PPE supplies. What type of mask? Are we going to require a mask? Well, and like I said, best practices is going to be you better use masks. And if you don't use masks, if you're not providing masks to your employees, don't complain to me if you get a lawsuit filed against you or you have an OSHA complaint against you, because that's what's going to happen. It's just that there. But, you need to determine, do we have the PPE supplies? Do we have the masks that we need? Do we have the gloves that we need? Do we have, if we're going to take people's temperature, we talk about down that a little bit, are we going to be doing that? Do we have those supplies? Are we going to wear goggles or safety glasses do we need to wear goggles or safety glasses? How close proximity everywhere? Are we going to be able to do social distancing? There's some places in businesses that they can't do social distancing. They're on top of each other. Well, if we can't do social distancing, are we going to put barriers in there or something like this, separate people like that? So, I mean, that's what the chicken and the pork and the beef processors had to do. They weren't providing masks. They weren't requiring masks, and all of a sudden they have a terrible problem with COVID-19. And then they had to go put in, what they ended up doing was they shut everything down, sanitized the heck out of it. And they have to sanitize every day anyway. It doesn't really matter, but they did even more so. But then they installed, these plastic plexiglass barriers between people so that they wouldn't be breathing or coughing on them at all, and they kind of cut down on the potential exposure. They're required to wear masks, and sometimes there. But if you're doing on PPE, if you're going to be doing temperature testing, well, the people that take temperatures, well, you're going to have to make sure they have gloves on. They're going to have to wear masks, obviously. They're probably going to have to wear goggles or face shields or something like that. And maybe have to have some type of lab coat or some type of whatever over their clothes to protect them. So all these are the supplies that you're going to need to have, and you need to make sure you have them before you can't open until you have all this stuff in place, or you can't restart because you just can't do it. And of course, you're going to be doing, I'm assuming for people that have been closed, they should have all their disinfecting policies or protocols should have been in place. They should have already done all their deep clean, so to speak, of their facilities if they've been closed all this time. But then again, you're still going to have disinfectant protocols as to how often are you going to clean things. I mean, if you're dealing with the public are you going to make sure that the card reader, the credit card reader, that they've been putting in their code numbers and stuff like that, or whatever they're doing, are you wiping that down after every use? Those are the type of things that you're going to have to deal with their protocol, the disinfection protocol. You understand that? And of course, you're going to have to, like I said, what is going to be our protocol for health screening of employees and our vendors, visitors, customers? Well, guess what? Nobody's coming in unless we're doing some type of protocol for health screening. And that most likely is going to be temperature taking. I go to LA Fitness, and they opened last week, in the last week, and when I go in, I get my temperature, immediately get my temperature changed or tested, and then they hand me a squeeze bottle with disinfectant in it and says, well, listen, when you're finished, every time you're finished with a machine, you need to wipe it down. We're requiring that there. And they had their thing where they were going back on disinfectant. They were going back once an hour and spraying all the machines there. So But we need, if we're going to do health screening, what is the protocol of all that? And that's going to mean, well, we're going to have, who's going to be doing it? Well, if we're not, maybe if we're lucky, if we have a nurse practitioner or nurse there at our site, then we should probably have him or her be the one taking the temperature. But they're going to be wearing gloves. They're going to be wearing face masks. They're going to be wearing some type of eye protection, maybe a face shield, and maybe wearing some type of smock or something else like that. But anyway, those are things that you're going to have to make that protocol and that screening. You're going to know exactly how we're going to do it. How are we going to make sure that we line up people every 6 feet behind them when they're standing in line to come get their temperature taken? Do we have tents outside so when people are coming in, if it's raining and we only, we can't, and we got a line coming out the door, are we going to be able to protect them? So that's just, all this is part of that screening process. And which direction are we going to tell them? I mean, the Publix up the street from me where I go, they have requirements for, they have all the aisles blocked, or not blocked, they have all aisles marked as one ways. Now, people aren't understanding that too well. I can tell you that right now. I get a lot of people, I'm going the right way, I'm kind of walking by them and they're coming down, and the sign at the other end of the aisle says, "Do not enter," and I say, well, I'm thinking like, yeah, where's the police here? Now we'll get them, the Publix police, and to say you can only go down one way. But that was for to make sure that people don't congregate, that they're all going in one direction, so you don't have people coughing on other people going the opposite direction, stuff like that. You're going to look about transportation. We say, Edwin, what do you mean about that? Well, what I mean about that is you're going to find out there are people that are not going to want to take public transportation. Some of your employees are not going to want to do that. And if they normally do that, and have been doing it, that was the old norm, you better figure out, because people say, I'm afraid to go on the mass transportation because I'm afraid I'll get the coronavirus. So, and so you're going to have to be trying to figure out how you're going to make sure that your employees have transportation to the office and back home. So, and of course, we're going to have to train our managers and supervisors and on employees too. And this is very important. I want you to mention it. And the reason I know this is important, because I'm dealing with so many clients right now that have been some have been open the whole time. Probably, like I say, 70% of them have been working full time, or been working, hadn't stopped working. And they've gone through their things, we kind of have to train their people about what to do. But what I'm finding is that if you train your employees, if you tell them all the stuff that you're doing before, and you have to do this before they come in. This training is going to be, part of the training is going to be done before they come start work. They're going to, I've already been trained to our office. We got an email saying, if you're planning on coming back to the office, you need to go and play this email or video, I guess it is some type of program, which spells out what you can and cannot do now that you're coming in. And it went through all the things that we've been talking about, and we're going to be talking about here. So but you really need to train in place. And if you're telling them all the things you've done, this is the most really important, because if you can tell them all the stuff that you're doing or have done, hey, we don't want anybody to come back here we want it to be perfectly safe. And what we did, we've done this deep cleaning. We sanitize everything. We've been fogging with whatever they got, the ionization machines and stuff like that, to get everything completely disinfected. And that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to require, when you come in, here's what you're going to have to do on getting your temperature taken. You're going to have to be, when you're standing in line, you have to be 6 feet behind there. You got to have, you need to be wearing a mask. You're going to have to wear a mask in here. If you don't have a mask, we'll provide it. But, everyone's going to be wearing masks. And we really rather have you wearing masks when you're in line, even when you first come in, before you even get your temperature checked. So all that is kind of what we're going to be training our employees. And then, of course, we're going to be training our managers and supervisors on, making sure that people are social distancing, making sure that they're wearing their mask properly, making sure, that they're following our rules and regulations based on this. And of course, you're going to have the signage there. That's one thing that, I'm seeing more and more. Just to give you an example here, once again, back at LA Fitness, I made a mistake, to tell you the truth. I came in to go swimming. That's what I do. I swam high school and college, and so I've been kept up, still swimming 2 or 3, 4 times a week. But I came in, and the pool was this first week. His pool was open, and I came in through there's a gate that you come through you go through the locker room, then you go through the restroom and showers, and there's a gate to come in and come into the pool. And right when you came in that gate, when you opened the gate, there was a sign there. It said, please social distancing, only one swimmer per lane. So I read that, okay, I got one swimmer per lane. So, and I went there, and there were other signs, the same color signs all around. And I'm thinking, okay, they're really being efficient here. They got their signage out here. And so I jumped in the middle lane, because I like that lane best, because it's actually a little bit wider than the other 2 lanes. It's a three-lane pool. And I'm swimming there for about a half hour. And then somebody else, I'm standing there. I just stopped finishing the swim to get ready for the next set. And the guy comes in there, hops in, and he says, you got to get over. Look at the sign. We can't have the center lanes closed. And I looked at the sign. It was a different sign. It said please social distance, but this one said this lane closed. So they had closed the center lane, so only the 2 outer lanes could be used for swimming, and that was the social distancing that you did. But they had that signage there, and so it's very important that you do that. So, and of course, on OSHA compliance here, now going in, I want to talk a little bit about this. It's interesting. I was talking to the regional administrator here. He's a good friend of mine, and we do a lot of speeches together and stuff like that. Anyway, he's and he runs Region 4 is the largest region in the country for OSHA. And he's been involved with the national office on suggestions on how to resume operations where OSHA will go back out, because basically all the inspectors have been staying at home also. They're out when they only were out on very serious matters, like fatalities. Like I said, I mentioned I have 2 fatalities going on right now. And the OSHA inspectors tell me, before these came up, we were just sitting at home. We were doing paperwork. We were doing a lot of paperwork. We were assigned informal complaints to look at the company responses to us on those things, but they weren't going out. So, but now they're coming out. So OSHA is going to be looking at, and my discussions with them is they're going to be looking to deal with the COVID-19 issues much more so than they have once they get back starting inspection. Matter of fact, they just issued a general duty clause citation for COVID-19. That's the very first citation that came out here in Georgia. So I think you're going to see a big push. I mean, the Democrats in Congress have been pushing them very heavily. They had a House committee meeting, and they kind of grilled the acting assistant secretary, and she basically says, well, we're trying to do as much as we can, but we can't bring our people back to the office. We don't want to send them out to places where we don't know if they're going to be protected. So that's why they're waiting on that. But they're going to be coming back, and just remember this: they've been hardly doing any inspections, and so and inspections is how things are kind of. That's how the Congress. That's what they understand best. Is how many inspections did you do, and how many penalties did you issue, and how much penalty amounts did you issue? That's all they understand, and so. OSHA is going to be when they get back, when they can get the go-ahead, the green light to go out and start doing inspections. All these inspectors are going to look to do a lot of inspections in a short time period. And so particularly on the construction area is one area you're going to have, but I think there's a lot of general industry areas that OSHA is going to be looking at. In fact, they've been talking about they're going to be dealing with the OSHA complaints that deal with COVID-19. That's one of the focus areas they're going to do when they start getting back in. So you may not have an accident or anything else like that, but if you have a COVID-19 person that's been tested, and they may claim that we didn't get picked because for some reason there, and so and I think OSHA is going to be looking at that very carefully. So we need to be aware about that. So, and of course, we're going to deal with we've already talked about the PPE a lot there, but we need to make sure that we have it. And that we're paying for it, because to be quite honest, one thing you should be doing under 1910-132, which is the general PPE standard, It requires us to do a hazard assessment. Well, for the most part, most employers, well, probably 70% of the employers in the United States had done that hazard assessment, and 30% had not. But the standard also requires that you certify that you've done the hazard assessment. Now, probably 70% of the companies have not done that certification. So OSHA is now looking at that. I'm getting questions in inspections on these fatality inspections. That's one of the questions they're asking. Let's see your hazard assessment on PPE, because as a result of the coronavirus, what you have to wear from a PPE standpoint has changed. And so you should have updated your hazard assessment for PPE to recognize COVID-19, and what type of a PPE equipment did you need to have in place? Well, obviously, we had to have masks in place. Now, you want to, and so you want to make sure you're covering all those type of different things there. So, bloodborne pathogen standard. Once again, that's you're going to have some potential where we have people because of their illness or whatever. We need to be careful about that. Infectious disease response plan. As I mentioned to you, we got to have some type of response plan. We have to have a control plan or action plan, whatever. I don't care what you call it, but you got to have that and have that plan. And OSHA is going to ask you for that, because the more once they start doing all these inspections, they're going to be focused on three or four areas. Let's put it. One, clearly, construction is going to be a big issue. If you're doing any type of outdoor construction, roofing, home building, you're digging trenches and stuff like that, OSHA is going to be looking out for you. And as soon as they see it, they're going to ask their supervisor to be able to do an inspection, and they'll do it right away. So you're going to have all that. So you really need to make sure that we have all those things in place, that we have our response plan in place that covers all these things. Because if we're not doing that, then we're probably going to get hammered from even OSHA, because they know that they're under the gun right now. The Congress is watching them. The judges, they got the lawsuits. It's been filed, and they're getting ready to file their response. And once all that's done, we may have a temporary emergency standard that deals with the COVID-19, and then you're going to have all these different requirements that right now you technically don't have. So that's one thing I'm saying there. I think you really need to look and make sure that you're following whatever they have out there. So record keeping. This is an interesting area also, because the question becomes, well, if under OSHA's record keeping standard, should we be requiring? Should we be reporting these? Should we be putting these on our log? And should we be contacted? If we have a hospitalization, should we call in? Because it requires that has hospitalization, or if somebody just turns in for medical reasons, those are, while they may not be life-threatening, they clearly are applicable. But and what I would say right now with respect to the record keeping is, OSHA just modified last week. I guess it was beginning of last week. They came out with a new change. There was a change that was made that basically said, well, that presumption that we give under the OSHA record-keeping standard, that if it occurs at work, it's automatically work-related. Well, we're not going to count that anymore. We're going to kind of look at each individual case. But then, I had a lot of clients that weren't reporting a lot of these things because people were put into, went to hospitalization. They were hospitalized, but they were not hospitalized within the 24 hours that you would expect is required under the standard, on the record keeping standard. So you need to be a little bit careful about recording things there, and particularly reporting things, because if you report it, more than likely now you're going to start seeing more inspections on those type of things. So I would be doing that. So that's the record keeping, and also the reporting requirements. And you remember the reporting requirements under the rules, which is still in place, but it's kind of wiggle room now on that. But if you had a fatality, you had to call OSHA within 8 hours. That's pretty, a work-related fatality, 8 hours. If you have a work-related hospitalization hospitalization, then you have 24 hours to contact OSHA. Now, You say, well, we get COVID people that had COVID-19 are being hospitalized. What do we do there? Well, the answer is the standard, OSHA standard specifically says, that if the incident is beyond, the 29 hours, that you're supposed to, 24, 24 hours you're supposed to call it. Then under the standard, it's beyond that time period, and therefore there's no reporting requirement. That's what the standard says. So you need to be a little bit aware about that. The fatality ones, you're supposed to be calling OSHA if you have a work-related fatality. And that's one thing that they changed the standard on the presumption and the record-keeping stuff. They changed that back in April. I think it was, or maybe late March. And they basically said, well, we're not going to automatically presume that this is anybody who gets COVID-19 that it's work-related because of all this community transmission. So, and then the last week or so, they came out with their thing about, well, we're going to require now that the employer make a determination that if it's work-related or not. So they're forcing you to do that. So, but you do need to be aware of those type of things, and that's what kind of deals with also about the reporting stuff. So, all right. One question comes about employees' refusal to return to work. What can we do? Well, they potentially have protection under whistleblower. You got to be careful about that. They got potential for under ADA claims under the ADA, so you need to be wary about that. So the question becomes, can the employee refuse to work? And the answer is the OSHA standard, and this has been a standard that's been there for a long period of time. This is not something new. The standard is that you have to have a reasonable justification. You have to have a strong belief, a reasonable belief that that you could be injured, seriously injured or killed if you allowed to stay in that work area. And then the second test is, was this a reasonable one? If outside a third party, would that be a reasonable reason for a third party? If it would be, then they're protected under OSHA whistleblower, and you have to be a little bit careful about that. But if they just say, I'm afraid to come back, and you say, well, but we're giving you face masks, we're going to give you gloves, we're sanitizing, we're doing social distancing, we're monitoring everybody and stuff like that, so you're going to be fine. If they refuse, then I would say that they lose their right to be able to have a job. Now, once again, if they're a protected class, you got to always be careful about that. Taking temperature of employees and vendors, that's been a question. Can employers do that? And the answer is yes. There is a EEOC guidance that talks about taking temperatures and what you're allowed to do. So I don't think that, and clearly they're allowing people to take temperatures, the CDC and EEOC. But I think you got to have it. Once again, if you're not taking it, I think you open yourself up to a potential lawsuit or an OSHA complaint, because I've already seen it. I've had 2 calls on these fatalities. The guy said, well, we need to, do we need to, are we going to take these people's temperatures, or are we going to, and what are we going to do? You just have to, you can take the temperatures. You can, if you're putting the data down, that's where it becomes a little tricky. And if whoever's doing the temperature taking, it would be, you're in much better shape if you have a nurse practitioner or somebody. If you have a nurse practitioner that's on site, you should be using him or her to take temperatures. Somebody asked me today, well, can I ask employees to take their temperatures at home and sign an affidavit what it was when they get there? And I said, I don't think that's a good idea, because first of all, they may not, if their temperatures is above 100.4, they may lie to you and not say, oh, I took my temperature, I'm fine. So I just said, you need to be taking your own temperatures. Don't pawn this off on the employees, because you're just asking yourself, it ain't going to happen. So what about masks in the workplace? Well, there's some question about that. If you're using an N95, an N95 is considered, or these KN95, which is the Chinese one, they're considered to be respirators, and you have to follow the whole respirator standard. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. Now, you may need to have an N95 respirator or a half-face respirator or something because of the whatever chemicals you're using in your workplace or fumes that you have. But I would say with respect to most employees, I would just be using masking, and that way you're not going to have to do, if you're using N95 respirators or half-face respirators or full-face respirators, then you're going to have to do annual fit testing. You're going to have them done a pulmonary function test. You're going to have to do other training there about that, how to properly move stuff. So you're going to have a whole series of things that you need to be doing. So, but I think masks, I think, are very important. And so the more people, if we can get everybody in mask all the time, I think that the virus is going to drop off dramatically, and that's going to help us a whole lot. Fitness for duties there. There's nothing that says you can't do it. People have been off from work for a period of time. Particularly if they've been in the hospital and had COVID-19, and now they're weakened and it's so you want to make sure that they're physically fit there. You just need to ask them that, or have someone ask them that question. So, and of course, when we respect to fitness for duty, I mean, it has to be job related. It has to be able to, you can't have, and I don't think you'd want to have a bar that's so high that nobody passes. So we're going to do that. And what happens when employees test positive? Well, obviously, we're going to send them home. And that was another question I had. Some people think, well, if he tests positive, can we just isolate him there and he can work? And the answer is no. If you have any positive tests, you need to send them home. Now, you got to be a little bit concerned. These testing, there's a lot of false positives. So if somebody does have, is tested positive and we send them home, we may want to be continuing to monitor their health situation, make sure if it actually turns worse or not. So, but if they do, obviously we're going to send somebody home. If somebody feels bad, they're going home. And matter of fact, we should have our signage out there that says, if you experience any of these symptoms, including not feeling well, you cannot come in here. You need to go home and social distancing. So, but we want to make sure on the testing there. Now, one of the things that on this change to OSHA record keeping, that this one that just did last week, they put more of a burden on the employer to determine whether or not the person really does have COVID-19, and should they be sent out? Well, it will be sent out. I mean, that should be part of your rules and procedures. Anybody that's not feeling well needs to go home. Anyone that tests positive for COVID-19, oh man, my mind's going base. You're going to make sure that they stay at home. I can't remember what I'm trying to say, but anyway, you need to make sure that they're staying at home for 14 days to make sure that they're quarantined sufficiently. So, so before they come back, and if somebody's been out because they've had some exposure, and particularly if they've had the virus, you really need to make sure that they do have a fitness for duty exam, that the doctors look at them and tell you they're not having the virus is gone, they're not going to be spreading anything. So we need to be aware of that. So antibody testing, that seems to become like the new rage. All I can tell you about the antibody testing is it's not an exact science. There are a lot of things, but at least if people have had the virus, they basically kind of tell them that they've had the virus most likely, and that if they're healthy, if they're not doing it, then that's a good thing. Of course, you got data privacy statutes that you're going to have to be worrying about. Make sure it's part of your plan, and of course your HIPAA obligations. And HIPAA is going to be, like I say, is really if you're dealing with health cares and stuff like that, your physicians are going to be dealing more with that. So I don't see that as a big, overly big issue there. So. How are we going to get employee retention? Well, we're going to have a program to read our trust and loyalty. And that's where I mentioned about the training here. I mean, the communications. Communications is really the thing. Tell them what you're doing. I have a client that's moved back and started out, and they're probably about halfway up to full employment, okay? But they've over the last 3 weeks, they've worked their way up to 50%, okay? But they told all the employees what they were doing. They told them what they had done, how they're going to have to, people are going to be wearing masks, they're going to be wearing gloves, We're going to have the stations, the sanitation stations all set up all over the place, available. All these things that we talked to them about. And it made a big difference with this particular client. Their employees feel, matter of fact, the plant manager called up and said, you know, Ed, we've done all this communications there, and I was kind of, you know, a little hesitant about it, but, you know, I thought it was important to do, and I'd still do. But he says, you know, our morale right now is the best it's been in years. You know, so because they talked to him about everything they were doing and asked for their input and all that stuff. So you got to have that. So you're going to be engaging your employees on that. You know, paying benefits. There's a two-edged sword there, because the question is, well, we're going to pay them more if they come back. But, well, if they've been paid more when they're back there for a while, what are you going to do? You're going to take off that? And the answer is, I don't think so. So you have to be a little bit careful about what you got going on there. They have, you know, there's some employees have gotten hazard pay. People that didn't stop working have been getting hazard pay. You know what? When you go back on that, you got to be a little bit careful on back that too. If nothing else, from an employee morale standpoint. But you need to know about your how you what are you going to be doing on pay and benefits? Has anything changed there on that? Childcare. This is another issue you're going to find that a lot of people don't have childcare all of a sudden now. So you need to be aware of that, and you're going to have to be figuring out how you're going to do that. We're going to try to figure out what other problems are in the facility there that we need to identify and then solve. And of course, we're going to be looking clearly at what is all the safety issues that we need to try to address there. So let's keep going there. Human resources and prepare to work. They need to make sure they have the safe workplace protocols put in there. Probably, you know, if you don't have a safety committee, you know, some states require safety committees, but most kids don't. But, you know, this might be a good time to help have that, get that input from them on that. And of course, I mentioned about the communications. This is essential. If the more you do communicating, you know, you're going to be surprised how this thing kind of work itself out there. Cleaning and disinfecting, making sure that we're doing the proper cleaning. Like, there's difference between cleaning and disinfecting. I mean, cleaning, you know, you want to do, could be, you know, sweeping the floors and everything else. Disinfecting means spraying stuff on it to kill the virus. So you need to be aware, but we need to have all that scheduled. When are we going to do our weekly cleaning, or when we can do, are we doing it on a weekly basis like we used to, or are we going to do it differently now? All those things are going to have to be looked at there. And of course, a healthy workforce, you're going to be determining, you know, you may be testing everybody, or at least with respect to people that you have, when you're testing, taking their temperatures, you're going to find there are people that are going to have a high temperature, and they don't, you know, they're a little bit tolerant of that type of stuff. So, so you want to make sure that only the people that you're letting in as best you can are going to be fairly, are going to be healthy on that. We've already talked about the signage. HR department should be participating in getting that. And also, we have to have protocols on when we have customers and vendors coming on site. Where are they going to be to have their temperature taken? You know, are we going to have them first, or are we going to do that last? Most likely, I'd say you're going to probably, unless they're coming in, you know, several hours before the start of the shift, maybe then you want them to come in and get tested. But whatever. I mean, I think you're going to have to be focused on that. But clearly, you're going to have are you going to have customers coming in, vendors coming in? Where are you going to have them tested? You can't not test them. If you're testing your employee temperature taking, their temperatures and stuff like that, you need to do that, take their thing. So, and once again, you're going to require them to have the same. Are they going to have PP? They need to know. I mean, I went to the store, you know, I'd broken a string. I have a guitar, and I'd broken a string, so I went to the guitar stop. It was right down the street. And there was this couple in front of me walking in, and all of a sudden they got to the top of the stairs, and they looked at the door, and they turned around and come back, and you know, they said, I said, "Is it closed?" And they said, "No, it says you got to have a mask to get in." And well, fortunately, I had my mask on because I've been wearing it all the time. So you need to have that, and they need to know. And if you're going to require a mask and you're not going to have mask available for them, you better well contact them in advance and saying, "Hey, we have a 100% mask requirement here, so you need to be working on that, or make sure you have it." And of course, we're going to train our managers and supervisors on our new policies and protocols, make sure they know that. And there's going to be a lot of questions that, you know, That's one thing I say, that if you have a lot of questions if you're not sure about how to answer some of these questions, one of the things we're going to include here on this slide is I got a checklist for opening businesses. So we'll have that, and I'll make sure that gets sent out with a copy of the slides here, so you have that there. But those it'll be able to help you with the answering questions and stakeholders. And then we got to share, one of the things you want to do, this communication, you got to be talking about how this is affecting the company. People are going to be nervous already. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They're afraid their business is going to go belly up and they're not going to have a job. And that's very fearful for them. So the more communication you can do on that thing, the better it is. So, and I talked about communications. We're going to know how we've got to have a strategy for communicating people. We got to have a schedule. We need to have a schedule, how we're going to do it. Who's the audience? Well, we got certain communications are going to go to our managers and supervisors. Some are going to go to our hourly employees, and other communications are going to go to our vendors and suppliers, and maybe even customers. We're going to be telling them what we're doing. And then, of course, we got to figure out who's going to be doing that, because let me tell you something. There's some people that just shouldn't be doing. I'm sure you did too. I've been to a lot of speeches where I'll be sitting there, and then some guy will get up there, and first of all, he'll read all his slides. So I try not to read all my slides. I hope I'm not reading my slides too much. And that's all they do. They just read their slides and go from one slide to the next. That just doesn't work, unfortunately. So you need to make sure you want to make sure whoever's going to be doing it, they need to have some type of authority. If it's a facility manager, a plant manager, or whatever it is, a superintendent, construction project manager, whoever's doing the communication, they got to have some authority. There's somebody and they really need to know what the message is and how we're going to do that. And there's all kinds of different methods of getting messages. I mean, we're not likely going to be doing group meetings, so we need to be figuring out, are we doing text? Are we doing emails? Are we sending home stuff to the home? Are we doing videos? Are we doing, what are we doing? Are we going to do Zoom meetings? Zoom must be making a fortune. The amount of work, I never used them too much before this, and boy, I'm on every time I have a meeting, it's on Zoom anymore. So, and then of course, we're going to have to figure out what exactly the message is, and that's going to be very critical. So, also we want to communicate our care and concern, what our business plan is. We need to let them know what we're trying to do, how we're going to get back to operate full 100% operations, any changes in our policies and procedures, and other resources that we have. We've already talked about that, how we're doing that. With respect to people working remotely, how are we going to get the message? How are we going to get our customers and stakeholders? Returning employees. There's issues that you have to deal with on furlough employees, bringing them back. Rehiring terminated employees. These are the issues you're going to have to deal with. I mean, there's a lot of companies that cut a lot of people. They took this as an opportunity to get rid of some people they've been wanting to get rid of for a long time period, probably. So you need to be careful about when you start rehiring people, particularly depending on what you gave as the reason for them being terminated. So you may have arbitration agreements, which allows them to file a grievance, and then you have to go through that. You need to look at your employment contracts. If you haven't, you need to make sure any revisions we need to deal with here about them coming back to work, that they're, there's a lot of waivers here. There's a lot of out there. A lot of companies are getting waivers to say, well, you won't sue me if you come back and get COVID-19. So, of course, we have the technology for remote work rules. We have to have those rules. How you can deal with technology, what type of equipment, what are the work processes. Here's the written policies we have on dealing with working remotely. You need to have these things because you got to make sure people remain productive there. So like again, we got to plan and prepare. Then we got to propose. We're going to probe into what we're doing, see where we are, how things are going. Then we keep proceeding. And like I say, you have perseverance. You got to keep going and going and going. So, we've made it to the end of that thing, and I'm sure there might be some questions here. And I'll just put up I think we're going to I think Deanna's may have some questions. I don't know. Here's my email and phone number, so please feel free to give me a call or email me if you have some more questions.
Thanks so much. That was fantastic. I do have a number of questions that have come in, and what I've tried to do is kind of bucket them into, some different areas that we can talk about. A lot of them are things that you did touch on, but I think the questions are about getting a little more specificity around the legal obligations of the business versus not. So some of these may be germane to specific situations, and if that's the case, you can just offer some guidance. But the first one here, kind of in the, decision to have folks return to work. I think a lot of our audience today is in office environments where, the state, you had mentioned at one point, the state has a, guidance that says those who can work from home should work from home. With that in mind, though, can employers still require people who can work from home to come into the office from time to time?
Yeah, it's your business. You're in charge. But once again, as we come back, we're going to come back in phase. We're not going to bring, it's just like our office has said, we're going to bring back no more than 11 attorneys for the first 2 weeks or so. We're only, and only 4 or 5 staff people and some other staff support. And that's it. Yeah. So we're going to be going that. So obviously, if they want to work from home for that, but that, it's still your business. You get to decide when the time is appropriate. But for those people that really want to work at home, letting them and they're doing a good job, and they're getting the job done. Let's put it that way. That's the other thing. When it's all said and done, you got to see how that's going to dictate a lot of that. But I think eventually we're going to have maybe saying to everybody to come home or come back to the office and work at the office. Once again, that's not going to happen until we get a vaccine, when everybody's there. I just don't see that happen before that. So,
sure.
All right.
Yep. Then I think the next one, again, in deciding to reopen the office is around businesses' obligations to make accommodations for certain scenarios. So you talked about public transportation. You also talked about there are folks who find themselves in a bind because, their daycares are closed and summer camps are closed and they don't have childcare. What is the obligation of the business to create accommodations for people who don't want to take public transportation or who, can't get childcare?
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's any legal requirement in that respect. I mean, I think what we do have, obviously you don't want to lose people. You want to be able to have, and that's what I'm saying. We have to consider those type of things. And once again, if they've been working from home, and that's an issue for them, then you want to, you might be saying, okay, well, we're not, we will allow you to continue to work from home. Because we understand you have children there and everything, and you have to deal with that. So, but I think in that respect, I would say that I think that, with respect, there's no requirement for you to set up a daycare. It's never, wasn't that no requirement before, no requirement after. But like I say, if you want to try to keep people there, you're going to have to try to figure out how that works out. With respect to, transportation, there's a lot of people, here in Atlanta, a lot of people don't want to take the bus, and a lot of people don't want to take MARTA, which they used to do. A lot of people took MARTA. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how many people are going to be, but, I'm assuming I have not ridden MARTA myself since this all happened, so I don't know how they are, but I'm assuming it's kind of like the airlines. They probably are going out. I had a friend of mine that flew from Atlanta here to New York, Virginia. Had to go up and he had to go. He didn't have any choice. And he said he went on Delta, and he said that was the cleanest plane I've ever been on in my entire life. So I'm hoping that MARTA is doing the same thing. The buses, I'm hoping to do the same thing with the buses, with the rail cars, or the subway, if you like to call it that. I'm hoping that they really did a deep dive on the cleaning of those and are continuing to try to figure out how to keep doing cleaning, keeping them clean. So you're gonna have to, like I say, that's what you're gonna have to do, figure out. And yeah. if right now they feel uncomfortable, once they get a vaccine, people are going to feel a lot more comfortable if they've had the vaccine that they're not going to contract the disease. So that things will open up a lot more once that occurs.
Okay. But it sounds like, to your earlier point about, kind of it's your business and you kind of make the rules. it sounds like you can require that people come in, on a limited basis. And if there's transportation challenges or childcare challenges, certainly you want to be compassionate and you want to take care of your good employees, but from a legal standpoint, the company is not obligated to provide solutions for those things.
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so moving on to kind of, all right, the office is open and, limited folks are in there. You talk about requirements for masks and for taking temperatures and those types of things. Does the employee have the option to not use masks or to not consent to having their temperature taken?
That's a really good question. I don't know of any laws, but I think here that you can require masks. Mm-hmm. You can require to have temperature taken, and say if you're not willing to do that, then you don't come in. Don't bother coming in, and you're not going to get paid. Okay. Because once again, it's still your facility, and I don't know of any employer that should want to have anybody. That's what I'm saying. It surprised me to still see so many people walking around without masks. I mean, every business should be requiring masks. I mean, and if you got all your employees, it's the only way you're going to really avoid getting your people. And if you're not requiring masks and somebody's not wearing a mask, and the guy next to him is wearing a mask, but he's concerned he's getting exposed, guess what? He's going to call OSHA. He's going to call somebody. Mm-hmm. Maybe the plaintiffs' lawyers that are advertising on television on these about bringing cases against employers for not providing masks, not doing social distancing, not doing disinfecting, all those different things. That's what that's where you look at those lawsuits. That's what they're about. The ones against Amazon, against Walmart, the meat packing, what was it? One was against the pork plant. One was against, Smithfield. All these things. What are they claiming? Well, we're not protected. We're not social distancing. We're not protected. They don't social distancing, and we don't have any protection. So and that's what I'm saying. What happens was you go look into the process, all the chicken, beef, pork, turkey, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You look at each one of these processing plants, you're going to see there's all these lines of people working. They're still working. They're doing the cutting and everything. But guess what? There's a plastic barrier on each side of them. Yeah. So you need to make sure that, and so that protect the employees best. And they're all wearing masks. They weren't wearing masks before. That's why the thing spread so much. These guys were 3 feet apart from each other. Yeah.
So the business has the ability to both require and enforce using these things, right?
Well, you can't force someone to wear a mask, okay?
Sure, but
if they don't wear the mask, they don't have a job.
Right. Okay. Next question related to business travel. Is it, again, we're kind of in this, what's the legal obligation versus what's the compassionate approach? What about folks who there's what the company considers essential business travel, but the individuals are not comfortable and don't want to participate?
Well, and that's a hard thing to do. And then you're going to have, especially if you're telling them they have to fly somewhere, mm-hmm. They have to drive somewhere. If they're driving their own car, I don't know what would be the concern. And they're, and then wherever they're going, they're using social distancing. They're wearing their masks. They got their gloves, whatever it is. That's not. I don't think that's everything. Now, and of course, as I mentioned before, OSHA has a standard. Or maybe I didn't answer. Maybe I should mention this there. OSHA does have. Their rules have been there for a long time about people who refuse to work. You have to have a legitimate fear that the situation presents a hazard for death and serious injury. Well, obviously, exposure to coronavirus has that. Mm-hmm. But if you've done all these things, if you have people if your employees are wearing masks, you're requiring them to wear masks in there, and you're taking their temperature, and you're sanitizing, you're enforcing social distancing, then their refusal to do that job is going to be a lot harder for them to prove their case and meet the requirements, because it has to be a reasonable person. They have to have a reasonable concern, and the reasonableness has a reasonable person would see that to be a reasonable concern. So.
Okay. Moving into a couple questions related to what you were touching upon at the end, which is some of the data and privacy. So, one question that came in, they have a receptionist taking temperatures as people walk in the door, and that is being recorded on a sheet of paper. Does that information, that data need to be secured somehow, or should they not be recording it in the first place?
Well, probably, I would say not recording. I don't. We've been kind of deferring, or our advice has been kind of against doing documentation of that, because the question is, this now a medical record, and therefore you have to preserve it for 30 years and everything else like that. So I would say you have to be a little bit careful. Now the EEOC guidance has talked about, taking temperatures and stuff like that. So I think with that, and the questions, you can ask people questions, and you're asking the same questions. I mean, the people are taking the temperature, and of course, the question here is, if you have the receptionist do that, taking his temperatures, is she wearing a mask? She better be. Is she wearing goggles or at least safety glasses? She better be. Is she wearing gloves? She better be. If she's doing all that, I would say that, and she's asking the questions. I mean, because if you're asking the questions, I mean, look at this. Let's just look what you say. We're going to have this data. What are we going to show? Well, we can show. I guess you can say, well, we showed that they didn't have a temperature. Well, we're not letting anybody in. The rule is, and that should be part of your COVID-19 control plan, is the rule is, if you have a temperature of 100.4 or higher, you're sent home. Period. So we don't let people come in. So, what does it matter, that the person had a 98.6 temperature or 90? It doesn't matter. So the data, that's collecting that information is not really helpful. I mean, you can say, well, they lied to us. Well, I guess if you want to go ahead and do that, I mean, I have seen that where they have a form that says, I've answered these are the questions, and the answers are, I verify that these and certify that these answers are truthful. Do you feel, have you been exposed to it, all that? Those are the questions. And EEOC says those questions are okay. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if you really need the documentation on that.
So it sounds like maybe the approach, the proper approach might be to establish the threshold, right, under which somebody is sent home, have the receptionist, do the temperature. I assume it's contactless, and that the proper PPE is in place. But, establish the threshold, and if somebody's below it, they come into the office. If they're above it, they go home, but you don't necessarily have to record that.
Yeah, you can ask them the questions. That's all you care about. Have you been since you've been here last? Have you found anybody in your household that's now has tested positive for COVID-19, or has showed signs of COVID-19? Have you had any of these signs in the recently, or in the last 24 hours since the last time we asked these questions to you?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be testing everybody. You're going to be taking their temperature every day. This is not something just because they do it once. It doesn't. They don't cut it, but. And they were telling them they got to wear their mask and everything before they come in. So, yeah.
So maybe you're checking the list that person got their temperature checked and they were fine.
Yeah, if you want to check, the receptionist might have a list of all the employees, and she just checks off everybody after that they
passed.
And you want to have the protocol. Part of the protocol is here. You want to make sure that no one's within 6 feet of each other when they're getting their temperature taken. Or maybe we don't want to have anybody, we might want to back farther, so that if the person gets their temperature taken and all of a sudden they're shooting at 100.8, well, now they got to go home. But, or maybe we're going to require them, if we have a nurse there, we're going to tell them you got to go to the nurse before you can come out on the work site. But you got a little privacy issue here. When you start telling people they got to go home and stuff like that, you better, because they got a high temperature. You got to be. That's a privacy issue, and you need to really be concerned about that. So that's part of your protocol. Should be keeping people back when if they find out that somebody tested above our 100.4, then we're going to have to decide how we're going to handle that.
Right.
We send them to the nurse there, or we're going to send them to a doctor. We're going to tell them to go home and go to their doctor. I mean, that has to be the thing. So.
Well, and that that leads very nicely into the next question related to privacy, which is, you talked a little bit about if somebody in the office does test positive, and if they do, certainly, that person goes home, all of these other things. But what needs to happen at that point in terms of communication to the rest of the staff who may have had interactions with that person? Can you,
Right.
do you do any kind of, attempt at contact tracing and understanding who that person interacted with? Can you say
Right.
the person who has it?
Well, yeah, the answer is yes. That's part of your control plan or your action plan, but it's more of a control plan when it's really said and done. And the control, yeah, and that's part of the control. Somebody all of a sudden, or even if they call in and say, oh, I was in work yesterday, but I was feeling really bad and I went and got tested and now I found out I got COVID-19. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you stay home, self-quarantine, let us keep in touch with us, let us know what's going on. And by the way, do you remember who in the last 48 hours, or who have you been in contact with?
Mm-hmm.
Who have you been within 6 feet of? You've been working with 6 feet of social distancing.
Okay.
Who are that? And you are doing the contact tracing then. So, but you're asking, that's part of the contact tracing. Contact
Mm-hmm.
tracing takes different forms. Clearly, you're going to ask the person, who have you been around in the last 48 hours or 72 hours or whatever? And then we might be looking at we may be looking at just the job, what they normally did at, where they located. We may be looking at video filmage from our security cameras, determine where that particular person, who that person came in contact with.
Yeah.
This is all part of the problem. So then we notify those employees that they've been exposed, and then we ask them, and we're telling them they got to go home and self-quarantine for 14 days. Well, guess what?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be paid while they're gone.
Yeah.
So, because we're asking them to go home, we're not, it's not there. So, and then they're going to have, before they can come home or come back to work, they're going to have to get, are they fit for duty? Fitness, we may be asked to require them to go see their doctor and get a sign off from the doctor saying that they're covert free and they can't spread the disease. So, because we don't want people coming back too soon. And then, some people want to come back after 10 days and stuff like that. They got cabin fever. And the answer is no, we want to get the full 14 days to make sure that if you were exposed, you show the symptoms. If you don't show the symptoms after that, get the doctor to say, okay, you can come on back. And then, of course, when we do have somebody, and we're not going to tell that person when they tell them you've been exposed, we're not going to tell you, Joe has it now and you were exposed. You don't have to go into that. You just say one of the employees has tested positive for COVID-19, and we have determined that you were working around that person, him or her. I'm not saying if it's a him or her, so we're not going to let you know about that, but now you have to self-quarantine for 14 days and we'll be paying you. And then you also need to notify the employees. Okay, we just want you to know that there was an employee in Department A that has now tested positive for coronavirus. We have asked those people who he is in contact with to self-quarantine for 14 days, see if they have the virus. And but we just want you to know there, please keep using your PPE, keep using your mask, keep wearing your gloves or whatever, please, safety glasses, whatever you're using there. Make sure they're doing it. Make sure you're social distancing. We're not going to eat. No one's eating together or anything else like that. So.
Okay. So, but you're recommending to not push out the name of the individual to,
Oh, no, I think you've got a privacy issue there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you never tell the person. And then what does it matter?
Right.
When it's all said and done, it doesn't matter. So don't tell, there's no reason to that, but they have a privacy issue on that. So.
Okay. So, but it's up to the employer to try and create some kind of track back to folks who might be impacted and
right.
encourage them to,
Well, that's part of your response plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or your control plan. I mean, that should be all. This is automatic. This is, once we know this, everything falls into place automatically. We find those people, get them home, notify the other employees.
All right. Well, we have made it through all of our questions. Oh, you know what? There is one. Do you know of any kind of waiver template for COVID? I think you had mentioned.
Yes, I think we have that on on the Fisher Phillips website. You can go to www.fisherphillips, all one word, and Phillips has 2 L's, fisherphillips.com. Well, you can see it right there, fisherphillips.com. And on the main page, if you just scroll down, you're going to hit all the COVID-19 stuff. And be prepared to be overwhelmed, because there's a lot of the stuff there, a lot of stuff.
All right. Well, Ed, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. And as I mentioned, on the onset of this, we have recorded this webinar. It will be available on our homepage, the International Housewares Association homepage at housewares.org, within the next 48 hours. But I appreciate everyone's time and all of your questions, and we will enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, thank you for having me. I really deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed. Bye-bye.